right, so the best way to really show mastery in solving systems of equations using substitution is really just to practice. So if you look back at your notes and have those out as well, you'll see the steps that I'm going to take to work these 6 problems out. I am going to post this document right here along with my answer key, so you guys can actually print this off and work on this individually if you want to, or you can do it with me as you watch this video. So the first thing that we're going to do here, first step was always to ask ourselves if we have one of our variables isolated. So in this case we do. This one is isolated here. So our y value is equal to 2x plus 7. So where we see y in this second equation here, that's where we're going to plug in that 2x plus 7. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I have 3x minus 4, and instead of y, we're actually going to plug in that whole value, 2x plus 7, and that's going to equal negative 13. So from here, remember we're solving for our variable. So our variable is x, and we are looking for a solution, which is a point. So we are always going to be looking for an xy value here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you guys. There we go. All right, so from here, first step is we are going to distribute. Now you got to make sure that you keep that sign that's in front of your number here when you are distributing. So we're just going to rewrite 3x minus 8x, and then this is going to give us a negative 28, and we keep our negative 13 the same. All right, and so then we're going to combine like terms. So remember, distribute, combine like terms. And we're going to end up with 3x minus 8x gives us negative 5x minus 28 equals negative 13. Our next step is to move. So if we had some x's over here, we'd want to move them over to get them on the same side, but we don't. So our next step is going to be to add or subtract. So we're going to add this 28 over here to this 13, this negative 13. We're going to end up with negative 5x equals, and negative 13 plus 28 is going to give us 15. All right, divide is our next step, so multiply or divide, and we're going to divide by negative 5 and divide by negative 5. We're going to end up with our x value equaling negative 3. So this is one part of our solution. This is our x value part. Now, if you remember from your notes, the next step is then to take this x value that you found and plug it back into either one of these equations. To me, it looks like this one is a little bit easier because I'm not going to have to like move my y value around. Y is already equal to this stuff over here with x. So I'm actually going to take that equation, y equals 2x plus 7, and I'm going to plug in my value of x for the x right here. So I get y equals 2, and remember these are multiplying, so 2 times negative 3 plus 7. I'm going to solve it. Y equals, this is going to give us negative 6 plus 7. So that tells us that y is going to be equal to positive 1. So once you have your x and your y solved, you do have your final solution. As always, you can check on Desmos just to make sure that you are doing this correctly. All right, let's look at a second one. So this one is very similar. Again, we already have y solved. So we're going to take whatever our value of y is. In this case, negative 8x minus 24 is the value for y. And we're going to plug it in right here in this second equation. All right, so we're going to do that. So we're going to have 6x plus 6 times that whole value of y, negative 8x minus 24. And it's going to be equal to positive 24. So we're going to do distributive property first. And remember, we always want to keep this sign, so we are distributing a positive 6 here. All right, and we're going to end up with 6x minus 48x. And then I'm going to come over here and do my math, because I don't know what 24 times 6 is off the top of my head. 24 times 6. 6 times 4, 24, 12, plus 2 is 14. So we're going to end up with 144 there. I want to make sure we pay attention to our signs. Positive times a negative. It's going to give us a negative 144 here, equals 24. Combine like terms would be our second step here. So we're going to combine 6x and negative 48x. That's going to give us a negative 42x minus 144 equals 24. Again, we don't have any x's to move to get to the same side, so our next step is going to be to add or subtract. So we're going to add 144 on both sides, and we're going to end up with negative 42x is equal to, and this is going to give us, looks like 168. All right, final step here is going to be to multiply or divide. Of course, in this case, we are going to divide, so divide by negative 42, divided by divide by negative 42, and I'm trying to figure out how many times 42 goes into 168. I'm going to come over here again and do some little side math. 168 divided by 42, and I'm going to guess that it probably goes in 3 times. Seems about right. So 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 4 is 12. Looks like we can maybe fit it in one more time. So I'm going to scratch that and do 168 divided by 42 and say maybe it goes in 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 4 is 16. So it does go in there exactly 4 times. Now we of course want to make sure that we're paying attention to our signs. So a positive divided by a negative is going to give us a negative, and we said it went in 4 whole times. All right, so again, we're looking for a solution. Here's my answer. I'm blocking my answer over here. This is going to be my answer for number 2. And there's that division for you in case you can't see. So our x value was equal to negative 4. Negative 4 is our x value. We do need to now find our y value. So again, this one looks like the easiest one to plug into. So I'm going to plug in my negative 4 for the x in this equation. Y equals negative 8x minus 24. I'm looking for this value. I'm going to plug in what I know is our x value. So y equals negative 8 times negative 4 minus 24. Y equals negative times negative is going to give us a positive value. 8 times 4 is going to give us 32. So 32 minus 24 will give us our final value of y, which is going to be 8. All right, so that's our other part of our solution. All right, next up, guys, so we have a couple more just like this where we already have one of our variables solved. And this variable down here, y equals, tells us our y value. So that's going to get plugged in right there for that other y. All right, so we're going to go ahead and rewrite negative 4x plus 8 times our y value. That's 5x plus 21. And that's still going to equal our negative 12. Distribute. So we're distributing a positive 8 here. Negative 4x. It's going to give us plus 40x. And 8 times 21, I think that's going to give us a positive 168 here. All right. Next step, combine our like terms. So we have negative 4x plus 40x. It's like saying 40x minus 4x, which is going to give us that positive 36x plus 168 equals negative 12. All right, we're going to subtract 168. So we're going to add and subtract. Subtract 168, and it looks like that's going to give us 36x is equal to negative 180. All right, divide by 36 and divide by 36. Again, I need to kind of do some scratch math, so I'm going to come down here to the bottom of my page and I'm going to do 180 divided by 36. I'm thinking 3 goes into 18 6 times, and we have 36, so I'm thinking maybe it goes in 5 times. 5 times 6 is going to give me 30. Carry the 3. 5 times 3 is 15. 16, 17, 18. So it did go in exactly 5 times. Again, we want to pay attention to our sign though. So we end up with x equals, and we have a negative divided by a positive. We said 36 went into 185 times, and we do need to make sure that that stays negative, so that there is -5. So our solution, remember, is a point. Our x value here, -5. Once you have your x value, you can plug it back into your original equation. Your easiest one would be y equals 5x plus 21. We're going to plug in for this x. We're going to figure out what our y value is. So we get y equals 5 times -5 plus 21. 5 times -5 is -25 plus 21. And that's going to tell us that y is equal to -4. So we have both pieces of our answer here, and that means we have our solution. All right. Next up, again, one more example here where you do have a variable that is already solved for, or a variable that's already been isolated. It's been solved for that variable. Tells us that we can just plug that whole amount in for y. All right, so we're going to have 3x plus 7 times, we're plugging in our y value, and it equals -2. So everything else from this equation stays the same except for this right here becomes this part, which is the y value. Distribute. So we end up with 3x minus 28x, and then minus 77 equals -2. Of course, to finish solving, we're going to combine like terms first. So this is like saying -28x plus 3, which is going to give us -25x minus 77 equals -2. Gonna take this -77 and add it to both sides. We're going to end up with -25x equals, and this is going to give us 77 minus 2 is 75. So we're going to divide by -25 here and divide by -25 here. I can do this one in my head. I think about quarters. 25 cents goes into 75 cents a good 3 times, and we do need to keep it negative. All right, so our solution, I'm going to kind of come back up here and put our solution. Our x value is -3, and now all we're missing is the y value. So we're going to take that -3, we're going to plug it back up in here, and we have y equals -4x minus 11, but instead of x, we're going to plug in our value. So solve for y. I'm going to do -4 times -3 and then minus 11. Y equals, this is going to give us a positive 12 minus 11, which tells us y is equal to 1. That's our other half of the solution. So our final answer here is -3, 1. All right. I know this is a lot of work here. This, guys, is obviously not the easiest method of solving, but it is one that's going to help develop those algebra skills for you. The last two examples that we are going to talk about today are a little bit more difficult. These are the ones where you don't have a variable isolated, so you're going to have to get that variable isolated first. So we look at these two equations right here. We want to pick out the equation that's going to be the easiest to isolate a variable. So I see this has a coefficient, a coefficient, a coefficient, but this one right here is already kind of by itself. So to me, this is going to be the easiest equation for us to solve for y. All right, so I'm going to take this equation, -2x plus y equals 20, and I'm going to go ahead and add 2x to both sides and rewrite this equation as y equals 2x plus 20. So now we do have that y equals part, so we can take this part and plug it in for this equation. Now you don't want to plug it back into the same equation you just solved for y. You want to plug it into that other equation. All right, so we're going to do that. So we're going to plug in -4x minus 2, and instead of y, we're going to put in our 2x plus 20. That's going to equal 8. And then from here, the steps are going to be exactly the same. So we're going to distribute. We're going to do negative 4x minus 4x minus 40 equals 8. Combine our like terms. Negative 8x minus 40 equals 8. Add this 40 to both sides. We're going to get negative 8x equals 48. And we should be able to do this math in our head. Divide by negative 8, divide by negative 8. We should end up with our x being equal to a negative 6. So that's our first part of our solution. X value is negative 6. We're going to take that, and you can choose either equation to plug that back into. So I'm actually going to plug it back into this first equation that we talked about. That's typically the easier one to plug it back into, is the first one that you start out with. So I'm going to rewrite it. Negative 2x plus y equals 20, and this time we're plugging in for x. We're solving for y still. So negative 2 times negative 6 plus y equals 20. It's going to give us 12 plus y equals 20. And to finish solving, we will subtract 12 on both sides. We're going to end up with y equals a positive 8. That's our other part of our solution, and we are done with this problem. So really the only reason that it is a little bit harder is just this first step where you're going to have to solve for one of your variables first. All right. Last example we're going to do today together. Again, we want to look and see if either of our equations are solved for x or y. In this case, they're not. In this case, the easiest one to look at, so this has a coefficient of negative 3, positive 5, a negative 1, which is okay. We could use that. But this, again, is a positive y. That's going to be the easiest thing to solve for. So we're going to take this equation and we're going to solve it for y just to get our original or our starting point a little bit easier. So I'm going to take negative x plus y equals 0. I'm going to add x to both sides. And I'm actually going to end up with y is equal to x, which might look a little strange, but it's definitely okay. That just tells us that our y value, we're going to plug in our x instead. So up here where we see y, we're actually just going to plug in x. We're going to end up with negative 3x plus 5, and instead of y, we're plugging in x. You can put it in parentheses if you'd like, and then equals negative 4. We don't have to distribute here because really, truly, 5 distributed to your x is still going to give you that 5x value. So we're going to end up with negative 3x plus 5x equals negative 4, and we'll combine like terms. So that's going to be like saying 5 minus 3 is going to give us a positive 2x equals negative 4. To solve for x, we'll just divide by 2 and divide by 2. X is going to then give us negative 2. Gives us part of our solution here. And then all we're going to do, again, you're going to plug in this negative 2 to either equation. I'm going to pick this one because honestly this one has less math that I have to do, so it seems a little bit easier. So I'm going to come up here. Now this is important. When you put negative x, you have to keep that negative, and where you see x, that's where your parentheses go. So we're subbing it in for negative x plus y equals 0. Negative, and our x value is negative 2 plus y equals 0. Negative times negative, that's going to give us that positive value, plus y equals 0. To solve, we'll subtract 2 and subtract 2, and we know that 0 minus 2 gives us negative 2. So that tells us our second part of our solution. There you go. Our second part of our solution there is going to be negative 2 as well. All right, so lots of different ways you can test to make sure that your answers are correct. First way is by plugging them in. So if you plugged in negative 2 here for x and negative 2 here for y, you should get the final answer of negative 4. Same for this one. But another way to check would always be to go in and plug these two exactly how they are into Desmos and see if that is the crossing point. If those two lines right here end up crossing at -2, 2, that tells you that you've gotten your answer correct.